The day of the operation dawned with an eerie stillness that seemed to blanket the entire research facility. Zara went through her morning routine with mechanical precision, knowing that every action was being monitored by Calaxian surveillance systems. But beneath her calm exterior, her heart raced with anticipation and fear. Today would either mark the beginning of humanity's liberation or the end of everything. They had worked for the neural transmitter behind her ear buzzed with final confirmations from resistance cells across the galaxy. Marcus at Camp 17 reported that his team was ready to create a diversion at the main power station. Dr. Kim had prepared a biological agent that would temporarily disable Calaxian sensory equipment. Torres had positioned himself near the facility's communication array, ready to jam outgoing signals at the crucial moment. But the most important confirmation came from Captain Elena Rodriguez, a former Earth Defense Force pilot who had been captured during the invasion and was now leading a small team of infiltrators. They had managed to steal a Calaxian transport ship and were currently hiding in the asteroid field surrounding the capital world, waiting for Zara to open the quantum teleportation gateway. Subject 7742. Report to Laboratory Complex 7 for today's testing. The facility's automated announcement system declared in its emotionless, mechanical voice. Zara made her way through the gleaming corridors, past groups of Calaxian researchers and human subjects. The other humans moved with the same defeated shuffle she remembered from her early days at Camp 17. They didn't know what was coming. If the plan failed, they probably never would. Laboratory Complex 7 housed the quantum teleportation array, a massive circular chamber filled with crystalline matrices and energy conduits that hummed with barely contained power. The array was used to transport equipment and personnel instantaneously across vast distances, connected to similar devices throughout the Calaxian Empire. Dr. Yexkal was waiting for her, along with 2 armed guards and a technician. The Calaxian scientist had grown increasingly suspicious of Zara's rapid progress, and today's testing session was designed to push her abilities to their absolute limit. Today we will test your capacity for complex quantum calculations, Dr. Yexkal announced, his 4 arms manipulating holographic controls with practiced efficiency. You will be connected directly to the teleportation array's processing matrix and asked to solve increasingly difficult problems. We want to understand the upper limits of enhanced human cognitive function. Zara nodded obediently, but her mind was racing. This was better than she had hoped. Direct connection to the array would give her unprecedented access to its control systems. If she could maintain the connection long enough, she might be able to do more than just open a gateway for the infiltration team. The connection process involved placing a neural interface crown on her head, a device that created a direct link between her brain and the quantum processing systems. As the connection established, Zara felt her consciousness expand, suddenly aware of vast networks of information and energy flowing through the facility's quantum infrastructure. The sensation was overwhelming at first. Data streams flooded her awareness, showing her the real-time status of Calaxian operations across dozens of star systems. She could see supply convoys moving between worlds, military fleets patrolling trade routes, and most disturbingly, preparations for the second wave of raids against human colonies. But as she learned to navigate the information flow, Zara began to understand the true scope of the Calaxian Empire. It was vast and powerful, but it was also bureaucratic and slow to adapt. The Empire's strength came from its size and technological superiority, but those same factors made it vulnerable to the kind of asymmetric warfare that humans had perfected over centuries of conflict. Fascinating, Dr. Yexkal murmured, watching readouts that showed Zara's brain activity. Your neural patterns are unlike anything we've observed. You're not just processing the data, you're actually interfacing with the quantum matrix on a fundamental level. How is this possible? Zara forced herself to focus on the test problems the scientist was presenting, even as she secretly began mapping the Empire's critical infrastructure. Each question required her to manipulate quantum fields and calculate probability matrices. tasks that would have been impossible for an unenhanced human brain. But Zara had spent months learning to think in quantum terms, and her experience with the resistance had taught her to see patterns and connections that others missed. As the testing continued, she began implementing her real plan. Using techniques she had learned from studying the quantum processor at Camp 17, Zara started creating subtle alterations in the teleportation array's control algorithms. To external sensors, it would look like normal processing variations, but in reality, she was preparing to open an unauthorized gateway to the capital world. The neural transmitter buzzed with an urgent message from Captain Rodriguez. Team in position. Ready for insertion on your signal. Zara acknowledged the message while simultaneously solving another of Dr. Yexkal's test problems. The Galaxian scientist was so focused on his readings that he didn't notice the small fluctuations in the quantum field that indicated unauthorized access to the teleportation network. Remarkable, Dr. Yexkal said, reviewing the data. Your efficiency has increased by another 30% during this session. At this rate, we'll be able to create an entire class of enhanced human workers within a year. The Empire's expansion capabilities will be unlimited. The casual way he discussed humanity's enslavement filled Zara with cold rage. To him, humans truly were nothing more than livestock, animals to be bred and modified for maximum productivity. The Empire saw itself as humanity's rightful masters, and they would never willingly give up that power, which meant it would have to be taken from them. Doctor, one of the technicians called out, pointing to his control panel. I'm detecting some unusual fluctuations in the quantum matrix. Should we abort the test? Dr. Yexkal moved to examine the readings, his yellow eyes glowing with concern. These patterns, they're not random. There's an underlying structure to them, almost like a signal, Zara finished quietly. The Galaxian scientist spun around to stare at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his alien features. You're doing this. Somehow, you're manipulating the array. But that's impossible. No human has the cognitive capacity for direct quantum manipulation. You're wrong about a lot of things concerning humans, Zara said, dropping her pretense of submission for the first time since her capture. You see us as animals because it makes it easier to justify what you do to us. But you never really tried to understand what makes us human. Alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the facility. Through the laboratory's windows, Zara could see explosions blooming across the research complex as resistance fighters launched their diversionary attacks. The carefully coordinated assault had begun. Guards! Dr. Yexkal shouted. Detain the subject. She's somehow connected to this attack. But the guards were already moving toward the door, responding to facility-wide security protocols. The Galaxians had trained for external threats, but they had never considered the possibility that their test subjects might be working. Together in an organized resistance movement, Zara seized the moment. Still connected to the quantum array, she sent the activation signal to Captain Rodriguez's team and simultaneously began uploading a virus she had designed during her weeks of studying Galaxian computer systems. The virus was unlike anything the Empire had encountered before. It used human-style lateral thinking and pattern recognition to adapt to defensive systems in real time. The teleportation array hummed to life, its crystalline matrices glowing with increasing intensity. Dr. Yexkal lunged for the emergency shutdown controls, but Zara was faster. She redirected power from the facility's main generators, overloading the laboratory systems and trapping them both in a cascade of quantum energy. What have you done? Dr. Yexkal screamed over the rising noise of the overloading equipment. What we should have done months ago, Zara replied. We're fighting back. A blinding flash filled the laboratory as the teleportation array activated. When the light faded, 4 figures in stolen Galaxian armor stood in the center of the chamber, Captain Rodriguez and her infiltration team, transmitted directly from the capital world's orbital defense network. Package delivered, Rodriguez said grimly, removing her helmet to reveal a scarred face and determined eyes. We've got 15 minutes before they realize what happened. How's the upload going? Zara's consciousness was still partially merged with the facility's quantum network, and she could see the virus spreading through the Empire's communication systems like wildfire. It's working, but slowly. The Empire's firewalls are more sophisticated than we expected. Then we need to buy you more time, Rodriguez said, pulling weapons from her pack and distributing them to her team. Torres, Kim, you're with me. We're going to make sure nobody interrupts Zara's work. The next few minutes were chaos. Rodriguez's team fought their way through the facility's corridors while Galaxian security forces tried to respond to simultaneous attacks across multiple star systems. The Resistance had planned their operation perfectly, every major installation. 3 weeks had passed since Zara received her first Resistance message, and the underground network at Camp 17 had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. What started as whispered conversations and hidden notes had evolved into a sophisticated communication system that connected workers across all 12 facilities in the camp. Zara had become one of the key organizers, using her teaching skills to help coordinate activities and share information. The Resistance had given her a new purpose, something beyond mere survival. Every day brought new challenges, new opportunities, and new reasons to hope. The quantum processing unit where she worked had become an unexpected advantage. The machine's complex operations required constant monitoring, which meant Zara spent most of her time apparently focused on screens and controls. In reality, she had learned to operate the unit with only half her attention. Freeing her mind to work on resistance, planning, and communication, she had also discovered something remarkable about the quantum processor itself. The machine was far more sophisticated than the Galaxians realized. It wasn't just refining materials, it was actually creating temporary dimensional pockets in space-time, allowing for the manipulation of matter at the quantum level. The implications were staggering, and Zara had quietly begun documenting everything she observed. Unit 7742, Vexstar's voice boomed across the facility. Report to my platform immediately. Zara's heart raced as she saved her work and made her way to Vexstar's elevated position. The massive Galaxian stood with his 4 arms crossed, his yellow eyes glowing with what looked like amusement. Behind him, a holographic display showed production statistics for all the workstations. Your efficiency has improved remarkably, Vexstar said, studying the data. 40% increase in output over the past 3 weeks. Most impressive for simple livestock. Thank you, Overseer, Zara replied, keeping her voice steady and her eyes down. Tell me, Vexstar continued, circling around her slowly. How does a former teacher become so proficient with quantum processing technology? It should take months to reach your current level of competence. Zara had prepared for this question. I've always been good with patterns and systems. Teaching requires understanding how different minds process information. I applied the same principles to understanding the machine. Vexstar nodded thoughtfully. Indeed, your psychological profile indicated high adaptability scores. Most humans struggle to grasp concepts beyond their primitive understanding, but you seem to possess unusual cognitive flexibility. He paused in front of her, leaning down so that his massive head was level with hers. I have a proposition for you. 7742. The Empire is developing a new training program for human workers. We need specimens who can adapt quickly to advanced technologies. You would be transferred to a special facility, given better living conditions, enhanced nutrition, and access to cutting-edge equipment. Zara felt her stomach drop. A transfer would mean leaving the resistance network she had helped build, abandoning the friends who depended on her, and worst of all, potentially becoming complicit in the Empire's efforts to make human slavery more efficient. However, Vexstar continued, there is one condition. You would need to demonstrate complete loyalty to the Empire. No more contact with other prisoners except as necessary for your work. No more whispered conversations during breaks. Total dedication to serving your betters. I understand, Overseer, Zara said, her mind racing. May I have time to consider your offer? Vexstar's laugh was like grinding metal. Time? You misunderstand the nature of our relationship. 7742. I am not making an offer. I am informing you of a decision that has already been made. You will be transferred tomorrow morning. Use tonight to prepare yourself for your new role. As Zara returned to her station, her hands shook as she tried to resume her work. The transfer would be a disaster for the Resistance. She had become a central node in their communication network, and her sudden disappearance would create a massive gap in their organization. But more than that, she realized this might be exactly the opportunity they needed. That night in the dormitory, Zara managed to slip away from her sleeping quarters and make her way to a maintenance shaft that had become a secret meeting place for Resistance leaders. The space was cramped and dark, lit only by a few smuggled glow sticks, but it provided the privacy they needed for important conversations. Marcus was there, along with Sarah from the quantum processing facility, Dr. Kim from the medical unit, and Torres, a former military engineer who had become the Resistance's tactical expert. They all listened intently as Zara explained her situation. "This could be perfect," Torres said after she finished. "We've been trying to figure out how to get someone inside the Empire's advanced research facilities. If you can maintain contact with us, you could gather intelligence that we've never had access to before." "But how?" Sarah asked. "They'll be monitoring everything she does. One mistake and she's dead or worse." Dr. Kim leaned forward, his weathered face serious in the dim light. "There might be a way. I've been studying the Calaxian physiology during my work in the medical unit. Their sensory organs are incredibly sophisticated, but they have a blind spot. They can't perceive electromagnetic frequencies below a certain threshold, frequencies that human nervous systems can detect and process." He pulled out a small device he had been working on, no bigger than a grain of rice. "This is a bio-neural transmitter. It operates on frequencies that Calaxians can't sense. If we can implant it under your skin, you could maintain communication with us even under heavy surveillance." "The surgery would have to be done here tonight," Marcus added, "and without proper anesthetic or sterile conditions. It's extremely risky." Zara looked around at the faces of her friends and allies. These people had become more than fellow prisoners. They were her family now, bound together by shared suffering and common purpose. The thought of leaving them behind was painful, but the opportunity to strike a real blow against their oppressors was too important to pass up. "Do it," she said. The surgery was performed in a storage room behind the medical facility, using improvised tools and whatever supplies Dr. Kim had managed to steal. Zara bit down on a piece of cloth to keep from crying out as the doctor made a small incision behind her left ear and carefully inserted the transmitter. The pain was intense, but she focused on her breathing and visualization techniques she had learned as a teacher to help nervous students calm down. "There," Dr. Kim whispered as he closed the wound with surgical adhesive. "The transmitter will take a few hours to integrate with your nervous system. After that, you'll be able to receive and send messages just by concentrating on specific mental patterns." The next morning, Zara was processed out of Camp 17 and loaded onto a transport ship bound for the Calaxian research facility. As the camp disappeared behind her, she felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. She was leaving behind everything familiar, but she was also embarking on the most important mission of her life. The research facility was unlike anything she had seen before. Where Camp 17 had been gray and industrial, this place gleamed with advanced technology and alien architecture. Crystalline spires rose into the purple sky, connected by graceful bridges that seemed to defy gravity. The air was cleaner here, and the constant sound of machinery was replaced by a subtle harmonic humming that seemed to come from the buildings themselves. Zara was assigned quarters in a residential pod designed specifically for human subjects. The room was small but comfortable, with a real bed, a private bathroom, and even a small window that looked out over the facility's gardens. Compared to the dormitory at Camp 17, it felt like luxury. Her work assignment was in the Cognitive Enhancement Laboratory, where Calaxian scientists were studying ways to improve human mental capacity for more complex tasks. The research was disturbing. They were experimenting with neural implants, genetic modifications, and psychological conditioning techniques designed to create more efficient workers, but Zara quickly realized that the Calaxians' understanding of human psychology was fundamentally flawed. They approached the human mind like it was a simple machine that could be reprogrammed with the right tools. They failed to understand the complexity of human consciousness, the role of emotion and creativity in cognitive function, and most importantly, the human capacity for deception and resistance. Dr. Yexkal, the lead researcher, was particularly interested in Zara's case. She had adapted to quantum processing technology faster than any previous human subject, and he wanted to understand how her brain worked. This meant extensive testing and monitoring, but it also gave her access to information about the facility's security systems, research projects, and communication networks. The bio-neural transmitter worked perfectly. Within days of her arrival, Zara was able to establish contact with the resistance network back at Camp 17. The information she gathered was invaluable: details about Calaxian technology, weaknesses in their security systems, and most importantly, evidence that the Empire was planning a massive expansion of their human workforce program. The Calaxians were preparing to launch a second wave of raids against Earth and other human colonies. They intended to capture millions more people to fuel their growing industrial. Zara pressed her face against the cold metal bars of the transport cage, watching the alien landscape rush past through the small window. The purple sky of Calax Prime stretched endlessly above jagged, crystalline mountains that sparkled like broken glass under the twin suns. She had been traveling for 3 standard days now, crammed into this cage with 47 other humans, all of them destined for the labor camps that dotted this forsaken world. The Calaxian Empire had conquered Earth 6 months ago. It hadn't taken them long. Their ships appeared in Earth skies on a Tuesday morning, and by Thursday evening every major government had surrendered. The aliens didn't want Earth's resources or its strategic location. They wanted its people. Humans, the Calaxians discovered, were perfect workers. They could survive in harsh conditions, adapt to different environments, and most importantly, they bred quickly. The Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for centuries, but their own species had grown soft and lazy. They needed a steady supply of workers to mine their crystals, build their cities, and fight their wars. Earth's 8 billion inhabitants would serve Nusley. Zara had been a teacher before the invasion. She taught 5th grade at a small elementary school in Denver, Colorado. She loved her job, loved seeing the spark of understanding in a child's eyes when they finally grasped a difficult concept. That life felt like a dream now, something that had happened to someone else entirely. The transport ship shuddered as it entered Calax Prime's atmosphere. Through the window, Zara could see other ships descending toward the planet's surface. Each one carried its cargo of human workers, sorted and classified according to their future roles. The strong ones went to the mines. The smart ones went to the technical facilities. The attractive ones went to serve in Calaxian homes. The rest, like Zara, went wherever they were needed most. A massive Calaxian guard stomped down the narrow aisle between the cages. He was typical of his species, 8 feet tall, with gray skin that looked like stone, 4 arms, and eyes that glowed yellow in the dim light. The translator device around his thick neck crackled to life as he spoke. "Listen up, meat," his translated voice boomed through the ship. "We're about to land. You'll be processed at Camp 17, where you'll live and work for the rest of your miserable lives. Work hard, obey orders, and you might survive long enough to breed. Cause trouble, and we'll feed you to the crystal worms." The other humans in Zara's cage shrank back in fear. Some of them were crying. Others stared blankly ahead, their spirits already broken. But Zara felt something different stirring in her chest. It wasn't fear or despair. It was anger. The ship touched down with a bone-jarring thud. External doors hissed open, and the guards began herding the humans out of their cages. Zara stumbled into the harsh daylight of Calax Prime, squinting as her eyes adjusted to the alien suns. The air tasted metallic and thin. making her lungs burn with each breath. Camp 17 sprawled before them like a mechanical cancer. Massive gray buildings stretched to the horizon, connected by elevated walkways and surrounded by energy barriers that hummed with lethal power. Smokestacks belched purple clouds into the sky, and the constant sound of machinery filled the air. Thousands of humans moved between the buildings like ants. Their heads down, their spirits crushed. The processing center was a nightmare of efficiency. Humans were sorted into lines based on age, gender, and physical condition. Medical scanners probed their bodies for defects. Intelligence tests determined their cognitive abilities. Genetic samples were taken for the breeding program. Each person was tattooed with a number and assigned to a work detail. When Zara's turn came, she stood before a Silaxian administrator who looked at her like she was a piece of machinery being evaluated for purchase. The alien's 4 hands moved across a control panel, reviewing her test results. Subject 7742, the administrator said through his translator. Age 32? Former educator. Intelligence rating, above average. Physical condition, adequate. Assignment, Technical Facility 7. Supervisor, Vextar the Enforcer. Zara was led through the camp by a human guard. Another prisoner who had been given a small amount of authority in exchange for his cooperation. His name was Marcus, and he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His uniform was cleaner than the other prisoners, but his eyes held the same defeated look. First time? Marcus asked as they walked. Yes, Zara replied, looking around at the massive facility. How long have you been here? 4 months, Marcus said. I was in the second wave of transports from Earth, used to be a police officer in Chicago. Now I help keep order here. It's not much, but it keeps me alive. They passed groups of human workers performing various tasks. Some were assembling electronic components at long tables. Others were cleaning equipment or carrying supplies. All of them moved with the mechanical precision of people who had learned that slowness meant punishment. What's Vextar like? Zara asked. Marcus's expression grew even darker. He's different from the other Calaxians, smarter, crueler. He's been experimenting with ways to make humans more efficient workers. Some of the things he does, Marcus shook his head. Just keep your head down and do your job? Don't give him any reason to notice you. Technical Facility 7 was a massive building filled with advanced alien machinery. Humans worked at stations throughout the facility, their hands flying over control panels as they performed tasks that Zara couldn't begin to understand. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and hot metal. Vextar stood on an elevated platform in the center of the facility, surveying his domain like a king on his throne. He was larger than the other Calaxians Zara had seen, with darker gray skin and scars crisscrossing his massive frame. When he noticed Zara's arrival, he descended from his platform with the fluid grace of a predator. So, Vextar said, his translator giving his voice a deep, menacing tone, this is the new meat. Subject 7742, former teacher. He circled around Zara like she was a specimen he was studying. You educated young humans on your pathetic world, yes? Taught them to think, to question, to dream of better lives? Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. How amusing, Vextar continued. Here, you will learn a different kind of lesson. You will learn that humans are nothing more than tools to be used. You are Livestock 7742, nothing more, nothing less. Your only value is in how well you serve the Empire. He gestured to a workstation near his platform. You will operate the quantum processing unit. It requires intelligence and attention to detail, qualities that your test scores suggest you possess. You will work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your quota is 100 processed units per shift. Failure to meet your quota will result in punishment. Zara was led to her station, where another human, an older woman named Sarah, began teaching her the basics of operating the complex machinery. The quantum processing unit was used to refine raw materials into components for Calaxian technology. It required constant monitoring and precise adjustments to maintain optimal efficiency. The trick is to find a rhythm, Sarah explained in a low voice, glancing around to make sure Vexstar wasn't listening. The machine has patterns. Once you learn them, it becomes almost automatic. But don't let your mind wander too much. Vexstar watches everything. As Zara worked, she began to understand the true horror of her situation. The humans around her weren't just prisoners or slaves, they were being systematically broken down, their humanity stripped away piece by piece until nothing remained but obedient workers. Some had been here so long that they barely remembered their names, let alone their lives before the invasion. But as the days passed, Zara noticed something else. Despite the oppression, despite the constant surveillance and punishment, the human spirit hadn't been completely extinguished. She saw it in small acts of kindness between workers, in whispered conversations during breaks, in the way people shared their meager food rations with those who were struggling. There was also something else, something that gave her hope. The Calaxians, for all their technological superiority and physical strength, didn't really understand humans. They saw them as simple animals incapable of complex thought or planning. They underestimated the human capacity for adaptation, for learning, for resistance. Vexstar was the worst of them. He delighted in finding new ways to humiliate and break his human workers. He would single out individuals for special punishment, forcing them to perform impossible tasks or subjecting them to psychological torture. But his cruelty was also his weakness. He was so focused on breaking spirits that he failed to notice the growing network of communication between the workers. Zara learned this network existed on her third day at the facility. Sarah slipped her a small piece of metal during their lunch break, disguised as an accidental touch. When Zara examined it later, she found that symbols had been etched into its surface, a crude but effective way of passing messages between workstations. The message was simple: resistance growing. Stay strong. Help coming. That night, lying on her thin mattress in the dormitory, Zara stared at the metal fragment and felt something she hadn't experienced since the invasion began: hope, not just for herself, but for all of humanity. The Calaxians thought they had conquered Earth's people, but they were wrong. Humans were survivors. They adapt.